Just 2 days before the wedding, I found out she was cheating. But what I did next? It shocked everyone, guests, family, and friends alike. This is a story of betrayal, heartbreak, and a revenge so brutal you have to see it to believe it. Around 7:30 p.m. on Friday, Toby's Bar and Grill. I had the impression that a truck had struck me. Stuck in a Manhattan conference room without a window for 2 days in a row, negotiating with a number of suits from a global bank, everyone was exhausted and angry. 2 long days spent hammering out the last details of a negotiation with a large international bank in a sterile conference room in Manhattan. I began the morning with the conviction that we were at a standstill and that failure was imminent. The log jam then mysteriously broke. Yesterday's insurmountable obstacles simply vanished. Perhaps it was the extreme fatigue on both sides. During the lunch break, I might have inhaled the sinfully large pastrami and Swiss on rye from a small Jewish deli. Whatever it was, their lead negotiator, George Willis, slid the final revised red line across the polished table at 1:30 p.m. He smiled wearily and said, "Norm is progress, Chris. On these final 2 points, I propose that we divide the difference." It felt like dropping a 100-pound weight when I signed off and scrawled my initials. Completed, contracts will be finalized on Monday. Everyone packed up after we shook hands and exchanged that worn-out post-conflict fake smile. The only sounds in the room were the AC's hum and my mind's cries for a pillow and a drink. To be honest, my initial plan was to crash in the city, get a room, order some oily room service, and then watch TV while I passed out. I was beaten. However, I recalled that Trish was already out of town. She referred to it as a girls' weekend. She and her sisters, Julie and Karen, came up with some grandiose scheme. They were on their way to one of Connecticut's upscale Indian casinos. You are aware of the type: bad cover bands, gaudy lights, and phony palm trees. Cucumber water, expensive massages, and day spas. Evenings spent flinging chips at a blackjack table like they're in a movie and sipping fruity cocktails. For weeks, Trish had been incredibly excited about it. In any case, let her enjoy herself. I thought she deserved the break since the wedding was only 8 weeks away. As she liked to say, it was 8 weeks until eternity. Our coffee maker even had it written on one of those adorable chalkboard countdown signs. In any case, I nearly gave in to fatigue. I almost decided to book a room downtown and screw it. But the thought of lying in another stale hotel bed by yourself in dimly lit conditions with an old air conditioner rattling in the wall. No, I needed home, my own blanket, my own couch. Perhaps a glass of bourbon and the sound of non-resonant silence. Grand Central, then, snatched up a ticket and proceeded to the Metro North. I grabbed my vehicle from the parking lot and headed north on I-91. I was rolling through West Hartford's downtown by 7:30, the streets were bustling with people, crowded patios. Loud laughter, and the smell of beer and hamburgers. Not only was I hungry, but I was hungry in the deep, hollow way that happens when adrenaline wears off. On the corner, with its sign glowing red, was Toby's Bar and Grill. I've been there a few times. It's nothing fancy, just good food and cold beverages, and no one gives a damn about your appearance. It sounded just what I needed. Home after a quick dinner and possibly a drink, I was unaware that everything would change the moment I walked through that door. Ordered a local IPA after sliding onto a stool at the end of the bar. For a minute, I sat with my shoulders lowered and my gaze straying to the large mirror behind the liquor shelves. Merely observing how the space fills up. A typical Friday night crowd, with couples slipping into booths, men giving each other back pats, and waiters smiling and navigating with menus. Then, as if it were just another night out, I caught them, as clear as day in that mirror, sneaking into one of those deep U-shaped booths near the back. Julie and Karen, followed closely by their husbands, Steve and Roy. Cozy as ever, the 4 of them place drink orders, joke around, and act as though this was always the plan. My stomach fell like a stone. They weren't getting facials or drinking cucumber mojitos by some pricey pool, but they were in West Hartford, not at Foxwoods or Mohegan Sun. That cold, tight grip struck me squarely in the stomach here. My entire being simply froze. Trish must be their companion. The entire reason why she couldn't be reached this past weekend. Remember, off-grid? She is said to be enjoying her best spa life by the pool. Trish lied about more than just a random detail, such as where she was and who she was with, because if her sisters were present and not with her, then she wasn't with them. Like dried paper, the entire weekend story fell apart in my mind. It began to feel like a bad joke, a ceremony based on a lie, with the wedding just 8 weeks away, 8 weeks until eternity. My beer was slid over by the bartender. I didn't give it a glance. Climbed off the stool, legs seemed to be composed of static. Shoved through the doors and went out into the darkness. The cool wind didn't help, my heart was still thumping somewhere in my throat, and my skin was still buzzing. I took out my phone with unsteady hands. I found her name, pressed the call button, and it rang twice. Then that voice, which sounded like she was reading lines from a romantic comedy, was way too vivacious and sugary. "How's it in the big city, my love?" "Done." "Don't do this, Trish," I said, clenching my jaw. I tried to sound casual when I said, "Hey you," but my voice came out harsh. We signed and completed the transaction, which was a huge victory. 1 beat. 2 pauses. "It's been a crazy couple of days, I kind of wish you were here. I'm just getting dinner now," allow the words to linger, with just enough sting to make her wince. She chirped, "But nope, you're so sweet, I miss you too." Brilliant, flawless, too flawless, as if she had been practicing. "We had such a blast today," she continued, sounding phony and syrupy. "Literally spent the entire day drinking pina coladas while lounging by the pool." She added, "I swear, I haven't been this relaxed in forever," adding a little giggle that she always used to sound adorable. It sounded rotten now, though. "It's going to be a big night, and I'll be seeing the girls downstairs for dinner in a few minutes at that upscale steakhouse I mentioned." Each word was precisely hammered into place, like a nail in the wall. The words felt like glass in my mouth as I said, "Sounds fun. Enjoy your time with Karen and Julie. I love you and am looking forward to seeing you on Sunday. Click to talk tomorrow." My hand was clenched so tightly around the phone that my knuckles were white when I looked down. The rush of adrenaline returned, but this time it was cold instead of hot. With razor-sharp focus, my mind opened the Find My Phone app. Remember the one we set up for peace of mind, for emergencies? I didn't miss the irony. After entering her details, the map spun, zoomed, loaded, and pinged. Not a casino, not Connecticut, and not even in the same state. There it was. Falmouth, Massachusetts, is located very close to the water on Cape Cod. A group of tiny beach cottages that I hadn't considered in a long time. Then it dawned on me, Nick Flaherty, the name of Trish's former neighbor, came to me like a brick. Always a bit too friendly, that guy with the smooth talk and stupid smile. The flirting would be dismissed by her as if it were an inside joke. We have a long history together. I dismissed it like a fool. His family owned a Falmouth beach house. Years ago, I had visited that place. The large, weathered house is almost falling into the ocean. Sue, his wife, had prepared lunch, a pleasant, quiet woman who always appeared a little uneasy in Trish's presence. In the beach cottage owned by his family, Nick married my fiancée. It made me feel lightheaded and like a gut punch. I took a step back, as if the air had become poisonous. I knew where to look for the truth. With my fingers moving automatically, I flipped through my contacts. Sue Flaherty was located, and then the call was placed. "Hi there." Sue's voice was gentle, amiable, and slightly inquisitive. "Hello, Sue. This is Chris Harrington. Chris, how are you?" "Wow, what a pleasant surprise. Are you anticipating the big day?" Her sincere tone, which was warm and joyful, drove the knife further. I took a deep breath. "Yes, Sue, pay attention. I'm not sure if the wedding is still going on. To be honest, just long enough to change the atmosphere between us." I let it hang for a moment. I went on, maintaining a steady tone, "This is going to sound really weird. However, is Nick taking a business trip this weekend? As if she hadn't anticipated his name in this conversation, she repeated, Nick, you know him, that's strange that you're traveling. Unless there's a game or a grill, the man stays inside the house. However, he did say that he had to leave on Friday morning due to a last-minute situation in Philadelphia, a client crisis or something. Why? She became tense as her tone changed. She knew something wasn't right. What's going on, Chris? Is everything all right? I inhaled. Let's get started. Don't freak out, Sue, please. I have a question. Is there any chance you have Nick's number configured in Find My Phone? She inhaled sharply, as if she had been struck in the stomach. Then there was a long, brittle silence. Her shaky, irregular breathing was audible to me. Then a fragile, hardly audible whisper, don't do it again, God. Through the line came a sharp, muffled sob. I just let her sit with it without saying anything. She didn't need to be interrupted by the type of pain she was choking on. It felt like 10, and almost a full minute passed. At last, her voice trembling, she said, he told me Philadelphia claimed to be a big client. She interrupted herself, saying, I didn't question it. I heard fast, frantic tapping of keys. Her voice broke open as she spoke of Falmouth, the cottage. There he is. I muttered, I'm so sorry, Sue, but it sounded weak. I located Trish's phone and found that they are together in the same location. She started crying again, unfiltered, raw, and ugly, but it stopped. Ice was the next thing she said. She hissed at that scheming witch's son. Chris, I swear to God that I'm going to call him right now and tell him to leave this house and never return. Then it dawned on me, not grief or emotion, but strategy. Wait, Sue, I interrupted, my voice full of urgency. Don't give him a call yet. She yelled, what, why the hell not? She was now so furious that she trembled when she spoke. Nick too, since Trish isn't expected to return until Sunday. Yes, she snarled. All right, just pay attention, I inhaled, gathering my thoughts. Allow them to enjoy their little dirty weekend and act as though they're smart. However, we make good use of that time and strike wisely for just one day, Sue. Then, without any prior notice or heads up, we struck them simultaneously, hard, and in unison. A pause occurred. What do you mean? She said softly. Now that my energy was burning hot, I began to circle the lot. Everything was falling into place. I'm going to change my place's locks tonight. I'll take out half of the wedding account first thing tomorrow morning, including every penny and the precise amount I'm entitled to. I'll then pack her shoes, clothes, and other belongings. I halted my pacing and steadied my voice while gazing up at the sky. You're sharper now, Sue. You call a lawyer Monday morning, the first thing in the morning, and ask him how to protect your property, cancel all of your shared cards, lock down your accounts, and get ahead of this before he even realizes what's going to happen. She paused for a long moment before taking a shaky but steadying breath. All right, Chris, all right. Her voice had changed, still shattered but firm. She sighed and let them sulk in their filth for another day. Boom, boom, I replied grimly and flatly. We're in this together now, Chris, so call me whenever you need to scream or talk. She also added that it's quieter now. I meant it when I said, thanks, Sue. After we hung up, I remained in the dark for a minute while holding the phone. Even though my fingers were shaking a little, my head was clear and focused, so it was time to move. I hit call after scrolling to the next number. When he replied, I said, Billy Jones. I just need the locks changed, but I need a huge favor, man, new garage code 2, keys only for me, early tomorrow morning. A pause occurred. So, Billy, unless there's some alien abduction tale I haven't heard yet, the wedding is off. Dead, buried, and cremated, all right, he whispered. 7 too early, dude. I owe you a lot, I said, perfect. No, dude, friends, neighbors, just, I'm sorry, Chris, click, I had a plan. I turned and went back into Toby's, cold and brutal. Julie and Karen were still there, leaning close, heads together, whispering, looking toward the door as if they sensed a change in the atmosphere. They assisted her in fabricating the lie and executing it. There was no way this could wait until tomorrow evening. It was time for this match to hit the powder. I went to the bar and got a fresh IPA. It was cold enough to bite into, and the glass was slippery with condensation. I took a long drag, allowing that acrid blow to prepare me for what lay ahead. I turned and proceeded directly to their booth. I carefully picked up the bar stool I had previously used, swung it around, and placed it directly at the open end of their small horseshoe table, obstructing the exit like a gate closing. Clung to it, leaning in with elbows resting on the gleaming wood, hands clasped loose in front of me, and simply stared without saying anything. Slowly and deliberately, let my gaze wander. Silence hung on the table like a loaded gun, and we could see the blood draining from both Julie's pale, frozen face and Karen's twitching eye. Steve's eyes widened at the sight of me, and he cleared his throat. "It's good to see you, Chris, man," he said with genuine surprise in his voice. "I thought you were out of town." Roy nodded and leaned forward. "We assumed you would spend the entire weekend in the city. Are things going well?" The fact that their faces were closed and they had no idea what I was going to say made it even more painful. I said nothing, though, observing Karen fidgeting with her napkin as if it were a debt to her. Observing Julie search everywhere but me. At last, I looked from the sisters to the men. Locked in on Steve after Roy. "Perhaps you ought to inquire with your wives about the situation." That was a slap in the face. Both men turned to Karen and Julie. Karen opened her mouth, but the only sound she made was a whisper. "Please, Chris," she said in a voice as thin as ice. I chuckled. It's really not what it looks like. A single, snappy bark that sounded like a bullet. "Karen, I believe it is." With my elbows back on the table and my voice lowering with weight, I leaned in once more. "I believe it to be precisely what it appears to be." I gestured toward the table with one finger. Pointed again. "It appears that my fiancée is not currently at some pricey spa in Foxwoods. Her sisters, who were meant to be with her, appear to be enjoying cocktails here and hoping that no one notices." Then I looked Karen in the eye. "Above all, Trish appears to be hiding out in a Cape Cod beach cottage. She was with her married neighbor, not by herself or her sisters." That final word hung there. Silence. Nick Flaherty. Karen's hand flew to her face as if it would protect her from the blast as she gasped. Julie broke down, her eyes wide with panic, her head shaking, and her tears loud and sloppy. "Chris, she does love you." All she was worried about was the wedding. I said it again, stressed, my voice rising sharply in spite of all the control I was fighting for. I leaned in, the heat radiating off me, because she was so stressed that she needed her sweet, loyal sisters to cover for her when she banged on someone else's husband for the weekend. On Tuesday night, you two were standing in my kitchen, discussing this little girl's trip while laughing and pouring wine. You built a huge lie while staring me in the eye. Julie cried out, her voice breaking like cheap glass. "We didn't want to hurt you." My hand landed hard on the table. Lie, bam, heads turned from the nearby booths, ice clinked, glasses jumped. "You didn't want to be discovered." "Julie, there's a difference." Steve reached out and tried to put that peacemaker hand on my arm, saying, Hey, calm down, Chris." Like it was burning, I snapped it off. I hissed, "Don't touch me, Steve." Then, with my rage focused on him and Roy, I turned on them. "Well, did you two know? Were you both aware of Trish's true location?" They both had wide eyes and slack jaws, as if they had just been slapped. "No way, man," Roy said hastily, his face flushed with rage that was obviously no longer directed at me. He turned to Julie and snapped, "You told me Foxwoods." "Julie, you sat there lying." "Same," Steve added, his voice tighter now, his gaze fixed on Karen as if he had never seen her before. "You referred to Trish's need for a break as wedding preparation stress." "Karen, what the devil?" Taking a deep breath, I stood with the weight of everything bearing down on me, but somehow it sharpened me. "That shit, the wedding is off. Karen began to sob once more, this time in a very untidy manner. Mascara is halfway to her chin already. She choked out, but the money. The band and the venue were already covered by Daddy. I said flatly and coldly, not my problem. Perhaps Trish could ask Nick to help out. Karen lost it at that moment, her face contorted in sudden, ugly rage. The martini glass with the olives still floating like tiny green lies was the one she grabbed. She whipped it at me before I had a chance to move. I was struck in the face by ice-cold gin, which was sharp, briny, and extremely painful. I stumbled back half a step, drenched, blinking, and smelling of treachery and vermouth. Karen screamed, attempting to leap across the table, "You arrogant prick," entering, making accusations against us, and destroying everything. Steve grabbed her wrist just as she was about halfway through. Tough, the sort of hold that traces, like a leash snapping, he jerked her back. "Karen," he yelled, his voice trembling with rage. The room fell silent as everyone sat down. Something clicked in Steve's mind when he turned from her to me and saw the mess she had created, as well as the gin dripping from my face. He snarled at her, his voice now low and menacing, "As you knew. You knew all along and took her place." Karen froze, fear taking the place of the fight that had been drained from her face like a burst pipe. Steve shook his head, no longer shouting, simply finished. He paused, "If this is the kind of crap you think is okay. Maybe I've been a fool all along, and maybe you're just like Trish." Karen simply sat there, unable to respond. I wiped my face with the edge of my sleeve, stunned, silent, and staring. "Calm now, when every word is sharpened by adrenaline, that post-impact clarity," I said, glancing first at Roy and then at Steve. "I need a full day without speaking to Trish, not even a text or phone call. Will you all hold that line?" With a slight shove, Steve released Karen's wrist as if she had burned him. "Yes, Chris," he said, his jaw clenched, "you have my word that we're fine." Even though Julie was crying into her napkin, Roy continued to stare at her as if nothing had changed. "Done, clipped, cold," he muttered. "All right," shook Steve's hand after Roy's. The sisters were no longer there. So they weren't even looked at. I left the wreckage behind, both theirs and mine, and walked into the night. Saturday was one long, unrelenting mission. At precisely 7 o'clock, Billy arrived with his toolbox and no questions. By 8, the garage code had been reset, the locks had been replaced, and my new keys, which were heavier than they should have been, were the only ones left in my pocket, as if they belonged to a different me than the one that existed 24 hours prior. The U-Haul followed. Slowly and methodically, closet by closet and drawer by drawer, the purge began, the sickly sweet scent of her designer perfumes, which had names that sounded like false promises, blended with stale anger. As if everything were fine, she curled up on my couch and drank coffee while wearing her favorite cashmere sweater, the black garbage bag she wore last Sunday morning. Without hesitation, pictures of us holding champagne on New Year's Eve, grinning on beaches, and swept into a box without a second's notice, memories were sealed and pushed into the dark, as they deserved to be, right to the back of the storage unit. It was surgical, not sentimental. I paid cash for 3 months and made 3 runs to the secure store on Route 6, Unit #142, throw the key beneath her Lexus's back tire, and park it sideways as if there were still any space left. It's not my concern if she finds it or not. After that, it took time to craft and refine the email, just the facts, without any drama or pleading for pity. Complicity, infidelity, and postponed event. It was set for precisely 6 p.m. and included over 200 recipients, friends, family, co-workers, and everyone else who had RSVP'd for a dream that turned out to be a scam. I called Sue at 5:30. She responded right away in a steady, low voice. "All set," she said. I told her the same thing. Since we were going to war, we synchronized our watches as if we were. I hit the send button at precisely 6 o'clock. After sending the email, I sent Trish a single text message. "I hope your weekend with Nick was enjoyable, the wedding is over." Before she could respond, I blocked her number, it was finished in an instant. Coordinated strike at approximately 8 o'clock on Sunday night. With a glass of whiskey in my hand, I sat in the dark, it almost melted the ice. Nothing but silence, no TV, no music. Then, like a slow wave, the headlights swept across the living room wall. She was home in her Audi. I remained in the chair. I watched the silhouette emerge, serene as ever, as if she had anticipated a gentle greeting. Perhaps they assumed I would be standing there crying or asking questions. On the drive over, she might have practiced her lines. Then the yard caught her eye, it was like a slap to her. Bright, delicate, and costly, her dresses were tangled in the rose bushes as if they had grown there, and her heels protruded like thorns on metal stems. The walkway was littered like evidence by the cracked mess of blush, foundation, and crushed compact. Additionally, her wedding gown was stretched and pinned to that antique scarecrow that Billy had constructed years prior on the porch. Its veil drooped over its button eyes, making it lopsided. It gazed directly at her, as cold and blank as I felt. She sounded as if something had broken inside of her. Then there was a scream. "What is this, Chris? What did you do?" In a fit of rage, she hurried to the front door and slammed her fists against it. "Now open this door. Do you believe that this is a game of some sort? I was embarrassed by you. Everything was ruined by you." Her voice rose as she pounded harder, her hands repeatedly striking the wood. "You don't know what you did." Still composed and steady, I moved closer to the door and spoke through it without raising my voice. "Trish, it's over. Unit 142 on Route 6 is the storage unit where your belongings are kept. The key is taped beneath your car's rear tire. Leave my property, please." After a moment of silence, her voice fell, trembling and tight. "After I've given you everything? After all that we constructed? Do you believe this is the end of it?" I heard the frame moan as she gave the door a forceful kick. I said, "No, Trish, you ended this. Now accept the decision you made." Then I heard the sound of a lighter. Click, click, click. With her face flushed and her eyes wild, she rushed back toward the porch, the scarecrow, and the dress. "All right," she yelled. "Let's just burn it all if that's what you want." Dry as paper, the silk and lace hem was where she held the flame. The flames and the fire spread quickly. There was no chance for the synthetic fabric. Like it had been waiting, fire rushed up the hem. Her ideal, expensive fairy tale dress vanished in a matter of seconds. Heat and light swallowed the scarecrow along with it. The porch was transformed into a firelit stage by the roaring torch that had replaced the bitter joke. Lighted orange by the fire she had ignited, she stood motionless, her face pale, her eyes wide, her chest rising and falling in sudden, sharp bursts. The wind then changed. An abrupt and swift gust of wind carried embers from the porch and across the small gap between our houses. Dry wood, peeling paint, and burning pieces fell onto Billy Jones's old garden shed's sun-bleached roof. It lit up almost immediately. Wild-eyed, Trish whirled around, gazing at the fire she had started on my porch, Billy's shed, and the locked front door that she was unable to open. Panic gripped her as she froze, breathing rapidly. Then, instead of running toward the shed, she ran toward her car, yanked the door open, and jumped in. As she pulled out of the driveway and vanished into the night, sirens blaring in the distance. Thank God, someone had called. Fire trucks were the first to arrive, swift and precise. In a matter of minutes, they extinguished the porch fire. Only marks of scorch and char remain. Then, with Billy's shed completely engulfed, they turned on their hoses. They lost everything because the thing fell apart before they could remove it. Then, with radios crackling, officers canvassing, blue lights, and neighbors now on their lawns, the cruisers arrived, phones in hand, robes, pajamas, whispering, observing. I made a clean, steady statement as I cracked open the door. After returning from a trip, the ex-fiancée argued, started a fire, and ran away. That was all they required. 20 minutes later, they stopped on the highway and located her. She was crying and driving crazily by herself. She was immediately taken into custody. There was silence in the courtroom. The sort of quiet that is constricted around the ribs. Tricia's hands were constantly fidgeting in her lap as she sat at the defendant's table, chin up. Sue and I were seated 2 rows behind the prosecution table. Her hand was steady but cold in mine. The prosecutor stood and buttoned his jacket. Your Honor. The facts are straightforward. Ms. Clark did more than simply flee the scene and destroy property. She started a fire, which was dangerous and endangered lives. A standing protective order was broken by her. She escalated over and over, both literally and figuratively. She lit the match. And that's why we're all here today. Tricia's lawyer stood up, polished and soft-spoken, attempting to portray her as a woman in great emotional pain. My client acted rashly, Your Honor. Although they offer context, the circumstances leading up to that day, emotional strain, public humiliation, and personal loss, do not justify her behavior. She is also willing to abide by any requirements the court deems appropriate. The judge didn't even blink. She was a woman in her 60s with steel gray hair and eyes. Trish slowly stood up after she said, Ms. Clark, in a steady voice. We wouldn't be having this conversation the same way if anyone had been harmed, so you're really lucky that nobody was. I saw Tricia's lips pressed firmly together as she swayed slightly. Consequences do not go away when you lose control. It has repercussions, the judge said, leaning forward a little. So, a beat, here they are. You'll be on probation for 2 years. You will cover all associated fire response expenses as well as full compensation for the damaged property, including the garden shed you set on fire. You will complete 200 hours of community service, weekly court-mandated therapy, anger management classes, and submit progress reports to this court on a quarterly basis. Another final pause, delivered without pity. One sharp crack of the gavel marked the end of the case. It wasn't just the dress that caught fire that evening. She lit the match herself, and the whole thing was an illusion. 16 months went by as quickly as steam from a mirror. Once more, I found myself standing at the altar. Same stained glass, same church. Now the suit fits better, the stress weight has been shed, and hours at the gym and a great deal of rage have taken its place. As steady as ever, Billy Jones stood next to me. With a single hand on my shoulder, he exuded silent strength. The few groomsmen who stuck by me, without flashy smiles, were good men who supported me. Bridesmaids floated down the aisle as the organ swelled. This time, there will be no forced smiles or hidden secrets, just hope and peace. The kind that breathes without screaming, with a simple veil, hair that glows in the light, and blue, steady eyes that seem to be holding something that no storm could shake. She stood like a home rather than glimmering like a fantasy. Her hand slid into mine without flinching when she got to me. We looked over at the priest. With the same words as before, the vows started. This time, however, there was a pause, a breath, rings being exchanged, and wait. You are now officially husband and wife. I felt a wave of relief like sunlight piercing smoke. Hand in hand, we turned. The audience stood, eager to applaud, then it broke. Like a sharp tear through the world, a scream ripped down the middle aisle. No, I'm getting married. Screams, chaos, and Tricia's teeth and wild hair as she burst through the back like a storm, her face streaked with rage and makeup, and a long gauze-wrapped bandage down one arm from her previous spiral. Too stunned to stop her, the guests scurried. She screamed, staring at Sue, You ruined everything, my life was stolen by you. She reached into her huge purse and pulled out a dark, metallic object that was flashing in the light. People screamed, clutched loved ones, and fell to the ground, beside me. Sue froze. I began to move, but too quickly. Roy was a blur from the front pew. He gave her a hard, full-body tackle that left her breathless. With a loud metallic crack, the piece flew and skipped beneath a pew. She screamed incoherently, wild, broken, and dangerous, and Steve was right behind him, grabbing her flailing arms and locking her down. She was held fast by Roy and Steve. They are both here today, not only for me but also because they have learned the truth about the other Clark sisters. As it happens, there was more than one Rot. perhaps this wedding served as a fresh start for us. Two are present. Quick, sirens outside. A few seconds later, police rushed in, lifted her off the carpet, and dragged her yelling out of the church. Additional charges, violation of the restraining order, and public endangerment. She had finished her games, then there was silence. The air was stunned and heavy, as if the entire church had taken a breath and was unable to exhale. Sue's hand shook in my own. I saw everything in her eyes when I looked at her. Disbelief, pain, fear, and something else. Decide, we had survived the fire. We had witnessed the worst. However, we remained upright. Trish didn't leave this time. She received an 8-month sentence in county jail for breaking the restraining order, disrupting the ceremony, and creating panic in the public. The court had run out of patience. We didn't hear from her after the sentencing. We didn't want to either.